was really excited for an adventurous first date, but jumping off of a cliff?
Isn't that what love is, though?
Start over.
I love the view from this cliff.
This is Improv in Real Life. I'm Jude Treder-Wolff. I've worked in mental health for 40 years, and in that time, the world has changed completely. Technology has transformed how we communicate, connect, even how we work. But in our relationships, change doesn't happen that fast. That's where improv comes in. Improvisers learn to create together without a plan, and they do that by learning a set of skills. Anyone can learn these skills, and they translate directly to life. In this podcast, we'll explore how improv can help us navigate the speed of life. And together, we'll explore how to face change with creativity, agility, and a sense of play.
For about 10 years, I ran a workplace wellness program for a company that wanted their employees to be healthy and have resources for making positive changes. For that program, I created a class called Why Change is Hard, because for most of us, better health means change, letting go of a habit that is bad for us, taking up a habit that is good for us, and the hardest part, reducing stress in whatever way we can. Well, most of what would come up in that class was the fear people had that the change would fail, that they would take a risk, put in a lot of work, only to fail in the end. Because our past failures haunt us. We don't always bounce back and try again. That's why this episode with Salma Soliman is a great one. She's a psychotherapist, social worker, and an improviser who has designed an improv-based therapy program. She has amazing insights into why improv is essential to helping us reframe how we think about failure. I hope you enjoy.
This podcast is brought to you by LifeStage. LifeStage provides opportunities for people to gain skills and knowledge for navigating today's uncertain world. The capacity for creativity, connection to new ideas and other people, collaboration, and community building. For more information, visit lifestage.me.
My guest today is Salma Soliman, psychotherapist, improviser, creator. She's fantastic. Welcome, Salma. I'm so happy you're here.
Jude, thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited for the topic that we're talking about today.
Tell us what the topic that you chose is and why you're so interested in this today.
Yeah, so today's topic is about failure and our relationship with failure. And I think it's such an important topic for so many reasons, and I could probably spend the entire podcast just talking about why it's important. But so here's the bridge between improv and our real life is that improv embraces failure. And quite frankly, improv actually celebrates failure. And it's such a unique and different way that we experience failure in a play space, and how that can translate and what we learn from improv and playing a scene or playing a game and sort of getting it wrong are really beautiful moments. And a lot of times the funniest moments that I've experienced are when failure has happened. And so if we can take that lesson of how beautiful failure can actually be and adapt that into our everyday life, I mean, what a glorious life we could live, right?
Well, yes. And as a person who continues to, I struggle with failure. I struggle with the feelings of it. Let's just talk about in improv, what makes something a failure in improv?
Well, I would say what makes something a failure in improv, and this is sort of an age-old thing that I hear all the time, that when you're taking classes and improv classes and you're learning a new form or things like that, you're learning a structure, right? So you're learning rules to play in. And then improv happens because there's no script in improv. So yes, you might have rules. And so then when you're quote unquote failing in improv, you're breaking the rule. And it's been my experience when I've done improv for over a decade, is that the rules are meant to be broken, that you learn the rules so you understand the foundation, you understand sort of the etiquette of the game, and then you go and break them. And that can feel really counterintuitive. And sometimes the failing is when we're inflexible, right? We're following a rule or we're following the direction of what the scene is supposed to look like, and we're not being authentic to the scene. And sometimes you'll find that things fall flat because somebody is so focused on, well, I was supposed to speak next, and this person interrupted and did a walk on or did something in the scene. And then suddenly we're so stuck in, what am I supposed to do? So I think failure in improv is when we're so stuck on rules and not allowing ourselves to have the flexibility that we can rely on the rules as a backbone, but not using the rules as a be all end all. And I can't do anything other than the rules.
So let's talk a little bit before we get into some exercises that we're going to use to demonstrate this concept for people that are not improvisers at all, like people listening that are interested in this topic, but they've never done a scene. So we would always start those people off, everybody who's new, as we were at one time, with very simple games, like a one word at a time story, something where you taking a turn, giving focus, taking focus, very, very simple rules, like you're saying. And I find that people who are even doing those very basic games will feel very self-conscious and we'll find ourselves tripping over our sense of what it's supposed to be and are we doing all right and do we look good and are we okay? And it's not meant to be braggy or anything. It's just we want to be able to be good at something. Totally. And improv it's forgiving, but it's difficult because you're humbling yourself to know that doing something brand new and our defenses are going to come up. And I think that's why there's a therapeutic side to it that's just inherently in it. Even the most simple games of one word at a time or an alphabet story or something really simple.
I think, something that I want to point out here too, which I think still shows up in improv. So even if somebody's signing up for an improv class, for example, most of the time we're doing it because we want to be more flexible. We want to have a space of play. And even if our intention is to play, I think the concept of failing is so relevant, because what I want to sort of point out as a distinction here too is that most of us aren't actually afraid of the failure itself, I think. But what we're actually afraid of is what that failure means about us. And a lot of times what happens is that our brains are wired to avoid the pain or the rejection. And so when we interpret failure as like a threat, our nervous system sort of gets activated and it says, there's danger, I'm doing something wrong here. And so with that game that you were just describing of one word at a time, starting really slow, a lot of times people are planning ahead. They're counting, okay, I have the seventh word. Okay, I've got to follow the story. I've got to be prepared with the right word. And sometimes people get stuck on needing to be really imaginative and creative. And sometimes what the scene calls for or what the word calls for is to say and, or to say the, or to say and we get so caught up in like, that's not profound enough. And so then we start judging and then we start equating our worth to like, I can't say the word I need to say something more funny. And then we're saying things that have nothing to do. We're not listening because we're so focused on having to get it right or perform in a particular way. And I think, again, what I love about improv and what we're teaching is that the failure it's less about, I think people are like, I can mess up, it's fine, but it's really what that means about us and then how we internalize that about our own worth.
It's so true that it very quickly people will cycle through. And I remember this when I was first starting as an improviser, cycle through feeling weird and embarrassed. And then if everyone's laughing, it was fun, very quickly could get to, okay, that was fun. I can let go of the idea that there's just one way for me to feel like I'm enough or to feel like I'm okay. And when you cycle that, even those simple games, because they're deceptively simple, really. They're very sophisticated ways of training our brain to, like you said, be present, to fully listen, and to connect to the next thing so that we are in a state of flow.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful model for people who are dealing with change. Everybody in the world is dealing with change, but people in therapy or faced with any kind of change, whether they're in therapy or not. But as therapists, there's always this element of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And what is this next step going to bring? And will I be adequate?
Yes.
I think we're helping a lot when we deal with the idea of failure to really reframe what that means.
Absolutely. Because I think you're hitting on something that I want to reiterate too, is we are, as human beings, we are wired for connection. When we were born into this world, we were born little babies who could not survive on their own. We weren't just thrown out into the wilderness and told, survive and figure it out. We relied on community. We rely on other people to take care of us, to help us grow. So our survival is so contingent on connection. And then when we have failure as this concept where we feel inadequate, it threatens our sense of belonging. So when we mess up or we get it wrong, or like the room didn't laugh when I said this one word, or I'm judging that the thing that I'm adding into the scene isn't enough, we tend to take that as a threat to our sense of belonging. And even if it's happening at a subconscious level, we're feeling the sense of disconnection. And that feels really terrible because our survival is so contingent on being part of community. We're not designed to be solitary beings.
That's so true. And it's not something that I think we are ever fully taught. We are just experiencing it, but that how easy it is for us to feel, if we're out of sync with the people around us, to
Yeah.
feel scared and a sense of threat. And sometimes that sense of threat is just right below the surface. It could be a vibe in a room. It could be a family that's going through tense things. But the
Mhm.
fact that we grow up in schools, in classrooms with other peers that we may or may not be in sync with at all. And there's no training in that.
Totally.
Now there is more with social emotional learning. There's a little bit more. But everything you're saying leads us to this concept that if we feel that sense of belonging is being threatened, we kind of could get used to having to compensate for it
Yes.
by being funny, by being enough, by being so nice, or whatever it might be, whatever our defenses are. And here we go into an improv space where there's a different set of rules.
Yeah.
And it's a different way to belong. And that reframing of how we belong, I think is a very powerful healing
Mhm.
if we stay with it long enough.
Totally, totally. And I think like, what I like about what you just described too is this idea that when failure hurts, we don't just sit with it. We tend to armor up. And what I love about improv is that it's a therapeutic way to sort of highlight the way that we tend to armor up. Because I've seen this so many times when you're just in a scene playing and somebody makes a comment about your character in that scene. And then you'll see people's defense mechanisms coming up, like when they're feeling angry or they're hurt or they're offended. And even though we can sort of dispend like the disbelief, like this is just all made up, those armors still show up. And our job is to learn and name what those armors are for ourselves. And then improv is a beautiful avenue to help us allow for more flexibility. That when somebody says something, for example, offensive to me, instead of getting angry and shutting down as maybe historically that was my survival mechanism, because that shows up in improv too. I used to do that actually. I'll self disclose. When I first started improv, I never stepped out on stage. I took all of these classes, and whenever we would have our class shows, I literally just stood on the side. And the whole show would go by, and people were like, today will be your day, Salma. Like, you'll get out there. And I'm like, I'm just a supportive body, and you need to walk on somebody to just walk across the stage. I got you. I'll do that. I was so terrified of being seen. It's bizarre now that I look back at like the growth that I've had, but that was my defense mechanism. And that's definitely a thing that I did in my real life where I would shut down, I would withdraw, I would sort of stay on the sidelines. And how funny it was showing up in improv in a space where I know it was completely play. I know I chose to be there. That's the funny thing for me is I chose to do improv. I said yes to going to the show, and yet my armor is still showing up. And so I think improv can be a really beautiful, safe space if we allow it to be, to help challenge some of those armors that come up.
Well, I'm going to yes and your initial fear with improv with my own sharing that I was so fascinated with improv when I watched it. And now I'm a musician, and as a trained musician, everybody hears every single mistake that you make as a musician. Musicians are very trained to be perfect, and you're drilling and drilling and drilling to be perfect. And so even to improvise as a musician was really hard for me because I was just afraid that it wouldn't come out well, so I couldn't really do it at all. But I was very fascinated by improv on stage that you're describing. I would watch it and say, I just have to understand how they're doing it. And when I got into the classes, I had multiple brain freezes up in front of everybody, and I was the only one that had these brain freezes. I would be just standing there blank, just blank. And my compassionate teachers would kind of, sometimes I would just feel like it's enough of me standing here blank. And they wouldn't let me off the hook. They would say, say anything.
Yes.
Say something. And then my other players, and I remember once where I really almost was like, this is too embarrassing. I can't handle it. But I said, I'm blank. I'm frozen. I have no ideas. And I really want you to let me sit down. And this teacher said, just say anything. And the other two people that were up with me took what I said and made something out of it that then I was able to actually figure out something to respond to. And that's when I got it, that the
Yeah.
perfection brain says, I have to do it. But improv, it's we are doing it.
Yeah.
And the vulnerability becomes an asset because we become more real and authentic on stage, but it ain't easy.
No, no.
And I'll tell you one beautiful thought, and then I know you have some games for us to do, but this beautiful thought that that teacher gave me and everybody else that was having a brain freeze, because then people started saying they were also having brain freezes, but they were covering it up with jokes. And I just didn't know it. But that he said, when you leave this class, you probably are on the train, on the subway, and you start thinking, oh, I should have said this. And tomorrow morning, you'll wake up and you'll go, oh, I could have said that. And you'll think of all these great things you could have said in the scene. And he says, you'll do that. And a week later, you'll think of something wonderful. And then it'll be that it's an hour after the class. And then it'll be a half hour after the class. And then it'll be a minute after, and then it'll be in the moment.
Totally.
So that space between the idea that is there and it getting to your prefrontal cortex gets shorter and shorter and shorter with practice. And I think that's a true thing about change in general. Didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No. I agree 100% in what you're describing. And I think in my experience, I think there's a misconception in that people are just learning to be funnier or learning to be witty, like more witty. And I don't think that's what it is. I think that bridging that gap of distance is us trusting ourselves more, is us increasing our mindful awareness and really being present and listening. When we are earlier on in improv, and even outside of improv, like, you're going to a job interview, for example, right? That same anxiety gets in the way. And what happens is these defense mechanisms or these armors that we have in an effort to try to survive actually become walls and barriers to the neural pathway of trust that our brains know. We have a wealth of knowledge and information in there. Like, for example, literally this whole podcast, there's no script. We don't have a script in our conversation. We're allowing ourselves right now to be present and responding to one another. I sure might have ideas of like, oh, I really want to hit this topic. But if I'm so focused on that, then this episode probably fails. I put that in air quotes because I say something, then Jude says something, and it makes no sense because we're not actually listening to one another, right? But when we can sort of suspend that. So I love what you were describing, but what I want people to really understand is that it's less about us just getting funnier and being more witty and building the skills in improv. But I think it has much more to do with trusting ourselves that we are enough and that we are showing up and we have enough information and ability in our bodies and in our minds. And we've just got to trust that and remove those blocks that keep coming in.
100%. And it is in the spontaneity of improv, just like our spontaneous conversation right now. We have to be aware of each other. We have to respond to each other. And improv is really that in this a little bit more heightened way, because there's actually, like, we're going to do a scene in a bit, some scenes, and we're going to play with some of the rules. And the idea that learning to trust yourself can make you feel like, I can handle this job interview. I can handle this wedding that my family is freaking out about, that I can deal with asking for something I want in a relationship. Improv can train us in this other way, like by being more creative, like you said, to be aware of what we want and be able to put it in words or in action. I have found myself, I used to procrastinate about certain kinds of conflict. And improv, I have to say, with all the training that I've done and the therapy that I've done, improv closed that gap between what I want to say and my being able to express it better than anything.
Yep.
Because it's putting it into action.
Yeah, putting it into action. And I also think that it unmarries our self-worth tied to everything that we do. Me asking for my need a lot of times, and I hear this with my clients all the time, that I'm asking for too much, I'm too sensitive, I shouldn't ask, like they should know, all of these should statements. And when we can remove that connection that my self-worth is contingent on what my needs are, that I can just ask for it and let other people's responses to me be their own, not mine. That if somebody gets angry at me because I was asking for, I know what my love language is and it's physical touch and I'm asking for that, and somebody says, well, you're asking for too much, rather than me internalizing and saying, well, maybe I am asking for too much, that I can say, you're not the right partner for me because I know what my needs are. And so it's building that trust within ourselves and unmarrying our worth to, like, we know ourselves. Let's trust ourselves. We know who we are.
The other thing you're saying that's really key about change and growth is that it's not a failure to make a change. It's not a
Correct.
failure to move on from something.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful gift of improv is that we do something together. It's a game, it's a scene, and however it goes, and then we
Mhm.
sweep and we start again. And I always say to groups when we do exercises that involve that kind of are very likely to get messed up, that
Mhm.
people are going to get there's a little bit of a brain scramble. So for the purpose of saying, it doesn't matter whether your brains get scrambled and the whole thing falls apart. What matters is how quickly do we regroup? And that's, I think, the theme you're talking about is that whether we regroup in the same way that we were before, in real life, I mean, or we regroup meaning, I just realized this thing is not for me.
Yep, exactly.
So I know you've got some exercises for us
Yeah.
to do together.
Okay, I think a good one to start with actually is a game called Starting Over. Uh,
Yes.
So, this first game Jude and I are going to play is called Starting Over. So, we'll start an improvised scene like normal, two people, no plan, just a suggestion. And at any point, either one of us can just say, Start over. And when that happens, we wipe the slate clean and begin again from the top. New choices, new energy, totally different direction. And we can reset as many times as we want. And I think for the sake of this game, Jude, let's really challenge each other and try to do it many times. And I'd like to explain why this is helpful, but maybe I'll do that after the game.
Let's do the game and then debrief it for all of its purposes. So
Great.
the words to say we're going to start again are, how do we reset the scene? What's the
We'll
words we
just,
use?
we're literally like in the middle. Let's say I'm in the middle of a sentence, for example, and then I'm like, you know what? Start again, start over. So the phrase that we'll say is start over
And either one of us can say it. We're not saying it to the other person. We can just say start over for ourselves.
for ourselves or for the other person. So let's say we started a scene and then I'm in the middle of a sentence and then I'm like, start over. You can initiate the next scene or I can. So it doesn't, just because whoever says start over doesn't mean that they have to be the initiator.
Okay. And we're not necessarily doing it for the other person. We're just going to organically do this. Great.
Correct. Yep.
All right. Do we get a suggestion?
Yeah. Natalie, can we get a suggestion of a location?
The top of a cliff.
Jude, I don't know. I don't know if we should be skydiving today. I mean, I know I said I wanted an exciting and exhilarating experience, but jumping off of a cliff?
Jumping off of a cliff is the it's the adrenaline rush of a lifetime. Look, I know we don't know each other well, but this is how you'll get to know me. A thrill.
I I I was really excited for an adventurous first date, but jumping off of a cliff?
Isn't that what love is, though?
Love? Start over.
I love the view from this cliff. It's beautiful.
I think it's okay. I mean, I've seen better sunsets.
You have seen better sunsets because you're a photographer and I haven't seen the world like you have.
I have a keen eye for, nature's beauty, and sometimes nature just can disappoint, you know?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes nature hurts. But right now for me, I mean, because I just don't get out a lot. I'm grateful for this view and I have to make an apology to you. I I tricked you. I brought you up here to tell you,
Start over.
look,
Well, 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 haven't we found a new mountaintop?
yeah, here we are on a brand new mountaintop, and in a weird way, nothing has changed.
I think it's in a really weird way that nothing has changed. We were on an exhibition thinking that a mountaintop would be life-changing, and it's the same old city down there, and we're the same people up here.
Yeah, you can't run away from your problems. You can go high up on a cliff, and guess what? I'm the same. I'm the same old, cranky housewife, and you're the same old harried business person.
Same old, same old. Well, I guess we head back down to the same old city and the same old trail and the same old life.
New start.
Well, I think this is really boring.
It is, it may be boring, but boredom is a kind of spiritual experience for anybody who's open to it. I hoped that you would feel the zen. That's what I was hoping that, hey, mother-daughter zen time.
You're right. You're right. I'm sorry. I don't know why I keep doubting you. I think I'm already starting to feel like that breeze that just, oh, wow.
Yeah. I I mean, and sharing it is there aren't a lot of things that we can even talk about anymore, hon.
You're
And
right. You're right. This is a new start, and I'm so grateful that you brought me up here. Start over. Do you think the cops are gonna find us up here?
oh yeah, no. No, look, they don't have the guts. They don't have the guts to come up here.
You're right. You're right. They don't have the guts. We got the guts. We're the brave ones. We made it up here, and we're gonna stay up here, and we're never gonna go down because they're never gonna come up.
Never gonna go. And guess what? I've got we can make a fire. And oh no, if we make a fire, they're gonna find us. I'm sorry. I
No,
don't know
you're
what
right.
I was thinking.
But maybe they're gonna be so afraid of the fire. No, you're right. I like what you're thinking. They're gonna be afraid of the fire. They're gonna think that the mount. They don't know we're up here. They're gonna think that the mountain is just like a volcano, and they're
Oh
gonna
my
be
God.
afraid. And then you know what? Maybe everybody down in the city is just gonna leave. You got something going. You're right. You're
Oh my
right.
God, then we make a fire. They think it's a volcano. They're never gonna come up here.
We are so smart. We got away with that robbery. We have all this money to spend.
We are golden. We are golden at the top of this thing. And scene. That was like
Yay.
5 pairs, right? That was like five
Yeah,
different pairs.
more.
So let's talk about your choice of this exercise. There were some very specific kind of things you're going for with this exercise.
Yeah. So, what I love about this exercise is I hope for all the listeners out there, they were invested in our scenes and wanting to know. I think, like, the first one, you were like, I'm going to tell you something. And I was like, what a cliffhanger. And I want to say, start over right here. Because what's beautiful about this game is the discomfort. Part of changing our relationship with failure is changing our relationship with the discomfort. And I
Yes.
want to know what you're going to say. I want to know what the next plot line was going to happen. And part of the journey and the skill that we're growing in and evolving in is the discomfort of the uncertainty and of the unknown, and then learning how to let that go, right? That even if I had something on the tip of my tongue that I wanted to say, but if the scene shifted, I've got to release that and let that go.
Exactly. And the disruption, not knowing when the disruption's going to come, you just go with the scene and play with it until somebody calls it. And going with the disruption it's uncomfortable, but it's fine. And it's actually fun. I think I like doing it. I really like listening to people make those adjustments and those pivots that you have to make and just following that rule. But like you're saying, this does kind of soften the edge of that harshness that we might find in ourselves of like, oh, what's the next right thing to say? Or
Right. Totally.
yeah.
I think what this game really messes with in a good way is our attachment to getting things right the first time. And there's sort of this pressure in life to stick with something even when it's not working. And just because we've already started, right? We're already in the middle of a scene, starting over gives us permission to let go without shame, right? I didn't feel embarrassed or shameful when you said start over or I said start over. We were playing, and it treats that space of like, well, that didn't work as information, not failure, right? And we weren't necessarily saying start over because the scene wasn't working. It was really just more about detaching from, we have to stay in this, and this is the rule that I'm following. And honestly, that reset button is something that most of us could use more often off stage and in our lives, right?
Oh my gosh, the idea that the starting over is a negative thing in any way really just comes from like you said, wanting to stay on the same channel, I guess, when it's an exciting, dynamic experience to just say yes to the idea, like whenever the start over comes, I'm going with it.
Mhm.
And that is a wonderful parallel to life, especially life at the speed of change that we have right now. Or when you have, like, you bring a baby home and everything is different than how you thought it would be. You start a new job and it's not the way you thought it would be. And so all of your expectations get disrupted all the time in life. We just think that there's something wrong with it, but it's really just being open to the idea that expectations are going to be violated all the time. And there's a mindset that you're talking about, which is to flow with those.
Yeah.
Now and then you have to stand up and go and have a boundary. But this game is a way of saying, I can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not about, I want to make sure that our listeners are understanding that we're not just saying always go with the flow, right? And devalue yourself in that. Like your voice matters, of course. But this is really about allowing yourself and giving yourself the permission to be flexible and knowing the difference of when I am attaching to a moment out of my armor is showing up and my survival. Like I'm feeling like a threat to my belonging or a threat to, I messed up and I did something wrong. And for us to learn how to discern between the difference, that I can allow flexibility. And then to your point, when I need to stand up for myself and have a voice and say, hey, you know what? I actually do want to finish that scene. I actually do have something to say. Know the difference, right? We are not allowing ourselves to just live a life through our armor.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that flexibility and the ability to pivot that gives us the discernment.
Yeah.
Because we'll be able to feel like, okay, this scene I want to play out, but all the other things I can let go and I can adjust, and if I have to. It's just knowing, I think that to your point about self-knowledge and trusting your self-trust. The idea of self-trust comes from doing an exercise like this. And it reminds me of lifting weights in a sense, like you're choosing a specific targeted muscle. And when we say yes to each other, yes, whenever you say start over, I'm going to start over, we're working that muscle. We've agreed to do that. And then when you have that muscle, the more you work it.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And I love the idea of really teasing apart certain muscles in our bodies, and not literally like my biceps, but even just like in our brains, the muscle of flexibility or like the muscle of presence, treating those as muscles to practice, that when you're practicing it in a space of improv, for example, it 100% translates into our real life, right? When I'm allowing myself to just go with the flow in an improv scene and I'm letting go of that sense of control and I need to know what the next line is going to be, I feel pretty confident in that most people experience that when I allow myself to be more flexible in a play space of improv, they find that that translates and generalizes, it starts to generalize in their real life.
Absolutely. I want to tell you a real quick story of how when my improv skills were like so pivotal to an experience when I was hired to do a training with engineers at a company somewhere in New York. I won't mention the company. And I was supposed to give these 2-hour trainings on stress resilience because these engineers had told their bosses that they were very stressed out. They told human resources that they were stressed out. And I had 3 groups. I was going to make a ton of money that day. And I get with these engineers and I have this PowerPoint and I'm going to do this in a corporate kind of way. And I start talking about stress and the brain and all the things we were talking about, and the looks of hostility that these guys, it was mostly men in that particular room that day, the hostility that I could feel from them. And finally, I was ready with my 2-hour funny, interesting, engaging presentation that I spent so much time on. And then I'm like, what's going on, guys? What is this? The look on your faces tell me that this is not landing on you and you're not enjoying this. What is happening? Tell me, what's this I actually feel hostility from you. And they started talking and they said, well, we told our bosses we were stressed because they installed a new computer system company-wide and they didn't train us on it. So we're stressed because we need a training in the computer system because we have all this work to do and our projects are pressing on us. We thought that's what this training was. What are you talking about? Our brains, we know we're stressed. Yeah. And I said, oh my gosh, I understand completely why this is not what you came here for. And I'm looking at the HR person at the back of the room and I'm sort of going, are you hearing this? And then I had 2 more groups that I had to talk to. And I just let them talk. I just let them vent. And I responded to everything they said. And I left the PowerPoint off. And it was all improvised from that moment on because their company wasn't actually listening to them. But the hostility in the old days before improv, the hostility from 40-something professional people in a room would have really stalled me out.
It probably would have made you think you were doing something wrong, that you're not performing well enough. You're not saying the right things to, which actually you were not saying the right things to them, but not because of you, but because the company was not listening to their employees and hired somebody to do training that had nothing to do with what they needed.
The spontaneity within myself would have been squashed by the sense of just the fear. It would have made me fearful because of all, like you're saying, the survival thing, all eyes on the person in front of the room. But improv training gave me this flexibility to say, let's have a dialogue. And I wasn't afraid of that. I wanted it. I wanted to say yes to whatever it is what they were feeling. So I was so grateful for improv training, and I felt like that was going to be a big failure. But it turned into something that they really benefited from, and then they ended up finally being heard. So this self-trust is most compelling and necessary when we're feeling in conflict and things are just wildly out of our expectations.
Yeah.
Which brings us to another game you have us ready to do.
Yes, let's do blind line.
Oh, let's do. I think my story lends itself to blind line.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'll explain this. This next game is called Blind Line. So we have Natalie helping us with this game, and she's going to feed us a line to say. So we're going to start a scene, and then there's going to be absolutely zero context. And at some point in the middle of the scene, and this will happen multiple times, she'll just feed us a line, and that has to be the next line of dialogue. So we have to say that line exactly as it's given to us, and it'll just be sort of typed out to us. And so even if it makes no sense, we will immediately justify it within the scene that we're in.
And she's going to cue us by saying ding. So
Yes.
listeners, when you hear the word ding, you're hearing an out of context line.
Yeah.
Yes. Hello, I'm Natalie. I'm going to say ding, and then I'm going to drop a line to each of you.
All right. So to get us started, and so we're not starting the scene over, by the way. So when the ding happens, it's still within the same scene. So we're not going to, like the last game, we kept restarting and giving new scenes. This one is all within the same scene. Can we get a suggestion of a relationship?
Colleagues.
Colleagues. Beautiful. Oh, another day at the beautiful office. You know, we're so lucky to be working so close to the ocean.
I know this view it just keeps me inspired. And then we get to also gossip, which I love.
We love a good gossip sesh.
We love the gossip sesh. And I love, look, I trust you with information that I'm about to share with you.
Oh my God.
Ding.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, sir, but you can't bring that in here.
I can't bring in my juicy story about seeing our friend Shelley out. I can't bring this in here. Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, I'm just going to have to tell somebody else, I guess.
This is so hard. With the new year, we made a New Year's resolution that we were going to gossip less. And I'm having such a hard time committing to this because you just planted a seed and you gave me a little bit and I really want to know.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that you're more virtuous than me. I broke that I didn't want to tell you. We made the resolution and I broke it within like 5 minutes of the new year.
Ding.
Ow!
I'm sorry. I had to pinch your mouth closed because I was afraid you were going to say something to me again. And I can't handle it. It's day 9 of the new year. I gotta stay committed to the goal.
Oh, you gotta let go of my mouth. Would you just
sorry.
let go?
Okay. Oh.
Ding.
Shh. Did you hear something?
Oh my God, I did hear something.
I think it's Mark. From accounting.
Oh my God.
I think he was the one who told on us. I think he was the one who brought this, people are talking and excluding us. Mark, we know you're there.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm just going to say this to you. Thanks a lot, Mark, for ruining the new year because, I loved dishing about him probably the most, and that's why he didn't like it.
You know what?
I wonder what the next part of the show will be.
The show of Barb and Sal?
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm going to tell you what the next part is. I think today's the day that I am breaking my New Year's resolution. Tell me the gossip, Barb.
Oh my God. Thank you, God. Thank you. Okay. So they are starting their own project. Yeah.
What?
And they are also having an affair. I knew you knew.
Ding.
No.
Officer, I had no idea that was in my back seat. I had no idea that information was in the back seat.
Well, thank you for calling me by my name, my title, you know, I
Officer Barb,
thank
I know,
you.
I know.
All of a sudden you get really formal and official. You don't have to be so formal with me just because I laid that on you about those two doing it. Uh, but and starting a project together by which, I think that's probably doomed their relationship because they also want to do some kind of they're going to start a coffee shop or
Oh,
a bed and breakfast.
what? That's silly. Nothing good comes from an affair.
Ding.
Ooh, what's up? What's up with that scary looking house?
You know, I don't know. Maybe there are more people in there listening in on our gossip sesh. We drove by, we're in our cop car right now driving around the city, and we thought Mark was lurking behind. It
Ding.
wasn't him. Hello, I'm from the FBI. We want to talk to you about that box on your front porch.
Wait a
That
minute.
box of gossip. Sorry, Officer Barb. It's me. I'm actually the FBI.
Barb, Barb, you've been spying on us the whole time? This whole time?
Ding.
What are you doing here?
The gossip sesh has got to stop. Enough is enough.
I can't stop gossiping. I got a problem. I got to check in somewhere. I think I need help. I think I need gossip rehab.
You know what? I'm with you. I don't know why they put me on the task force to end gossip sesh. I I can't.
Ding.
I already said I'm sorry.
You did. You already made amends.
Don't they know that this is what helps us stay present and alive and wanting to do our jobs, having our gossip sesh?
Yes, and here because we see all of humanity doing in our, just driving around and we're seeing everything, people doing their stuff. We need the juice. We
We
need
gotta
it. I
talk
do
about
need it.
Ding.
This is
Actually, our town has 4 main streets: North Main, East Main, West Main, and Main. Which do you want?
I think we should just turn on Maine. I think, let's just circle back. Let's just circle back. We got to go back to the headquarters. I think today was a semi-successful drive around the city, and we got to go.
Yeah,
Maine.
there's so many mains. And see, I love you got us in that cop car. That was good.
I was like, wait, where are we? Where? And then I had to justify. I felt like, which is part of the game, justifying. We're like, oh my God, I hear something. Is that Mark? And I was like, well, if we're driving around in a cop car, where did Mark come from? Is he hiding in our back? And then we're just paranoid. Oh, what a fun game. You know what I always love about this game too? Which is really helpful to the point of the game. But a lot of times when I've played this game, the blind line tends to be, you can justify it. Like they're not so far out there. We can make it work. And I think a lot of these were easy to justify. And we had no plan for this. So I'm hoping that when people are listening to this, they're like, wow, that was actually a really great scene. It was all blind lines.
Yes, they were random from a random generated website, right? It's a line generator website. So it is amazing how if you just commit hard
Yeah.
to the words, and that is another great improv lesson that we can talk
Yes.
about, our improv gift,
Yeah.
which is by committing hard, your brain actually comes up with something.
Absolutely. See, here's the thing. This game completely removes the illusion of being prepared. And a lot of times the anxiety that comes and the fear of failure comes from I have to be prepared. Almost like I have to know what the other person is going to say. I have to know how I'm going to respond. And us speaking before we understand, right? We hear the ding and we immediately say the line. I didn't read the line and then deliver it. I immediately read it. And this honestly mirrors real life more than we'd like to admit. Blind line teaches that the meaning doesn't have to come first, that it can come after. We can say the thing and then we justify it. And the real mistake, again, air quotes, isn't saying something weird or unexpected. It's the freezing up because we don't trust ourselves to figure it out. Right. And I think that's the thing that we're learning and we're sort of showing is that part of this is not about saying the wrong thing or getting it wrong, but trusting that we can flow with it, that we can keep moving through it.
That's beautifully expressed. And it's sort of the opposite of how we are trained in a way to think when we're sitting in a class,
Yeah.
or we're showing up in the world in ways where we're supposed to have answers, or we're supposed to have a certain profile or whatever. And we get used to that, and you get habits that go that way. And it's a little uncomfortable to say, I'm going to do the thing and then understand it after.
Totally. Yeah.
But that's the gift of creativity is that we discover our brains will expand if we let them. If we emotionally commit to an idea, and also my commitment was to you and
Mhm.
you to me. So
Mhm.
I think that the we-ness of improv really, really lubricates that process also, that we're not just in it on our own. We're
Yeah.
we're supporting each other in it. And then through doing that, those muscles get worked.
I like one of the things that you were just saying too, you touched on, because sometimes it's not about like the what we're saying, but what I like to think about, obviously I have my therapist hat on as I'm always always having it on, but the emotional responses, right? The intuitively allowing ourselves to express and feel what we feel. And a lot of times we have learned over the course of time, there's this concept between this idea of like primary and secondary emotions. Primary emotions are the ones that we are born with. We feel them innately, they're universal. Happiness around the world looks the same. Secondary emotions, though, are the emotions that we are taught to feel about our emotions. And a lot of times, what trips us up and what makes us freeze or hesitate to participate in a moment is because our emotion we feel like, or we're judging that the emotion that I have, if I'm getting angry at you and I want to express that anger, we're afraid of our own anger. What if I say the wrong thing? And I think what improv can really help in sort of allowing especially with this game of blind line, is allowing ourselves to feel first, say the thing first, and then explain it after. And of course, and I'm not saying go cuss somebody out and be like, well, I was just so angry, let me just justify it. But it's allowing ourselves to not be afraid of what intuitively is coming up for us, and then trusting that if I was offended by something that you said, rather than telling myself, oh, I'm just too sensitive, I shouldn't be offended, maybe there's a value of mine that I don't want to be spoken to in a particular way. And instead of allowing myself to be spoken to in that way, and I'm not addressing that boundary, or I'm not addressing that need, well, then who gets harmed most in the end? The person who doesn't know that that's a boundary of yours, or you who constantly keeps taking this lack of, or just keeps taking this hurt, and then we're twisting it in our brains. So I think what I like about this, long story short, what I'm trying to say is, allowing and trusting in what intuitively comes up. And then sure, the growth edge could be, maybe I want to get better at not responding in, shutting down with my anger, but I still allow my anger to show up, or still allow my grief or my sadness to show up, and then just mastering how I let it show up without feeling like I have to armor up against it.
Well, you're hitting this is a wonderful explanation of primary and secondary emotions. When another thing that I think people just don't know the language of feelings, their
Mhm.
own feelings, or the language of feelings as human beings. And so improv is the gym, it's the laboratory where we explore it, and then we could take it out into the world in this very selective way. Say, oh, I got better at
Yeah.
saying something that's difficult for me. Or maybe something can come up in an improv scene, like if a person may feel uncomfortable. I like playing characters that are very flawed, like we were gossipy characters, which is very fun. And not that it's right or wrong, but I mean, it's a person who loves gossip and thinks they have a problem with it is a flawed person and knows they're flawed. And then you're practicing really expressing being an undefended person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is another way in which this theme of failure
Yeah.
plays out in improv. I play a lot with people that I train, either social workers that I train or people that are just learning improv for improv's sake, to play characters that really know what their flaw is and double down on it. In fact, like love it. It will be so liberating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I like to ask the question too, especially as we're thinking about our relationship with failure, like what would change if we treated failure as a teacher instead of a threat? Because I think what we're trying to talk about here is that we're trained to see failure as a threat. And what if we change that relationship with failure and we saw that as information giving, as insight building, and we changed our relationship with failure as a teacher.
Yes, as self-knowledge,
Yeah.
as muscle building, and encouraging yourself to say, I tried something. If I didn't try, I wouldn't have failed. And now I have some experience because I tried something, and that's a wonderful gift of improv, is all the things you just said and that I just repeated for no reason.
Beautiful. That's great.
I'm affirming you.
Thank you.
I want to say it was such a delight, Salma, to have you on this episode. I loved everything you said about the gifts of improvisation to real life goals and challenges, dealing with change. How can people find you? And just briefly, if you can, because we'll put it in the show notes, tell everybody about what you're doing with improv and therapy in your part of the world.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that. So I am a licensed clinical social worker and I have my own practice called Brave You Therapy. And you can find me at www.braveyoutherapy.com. And one of my loves and things that I'm doing in my practice is actually improv therapy, where I am bridging the gap between improv exercises as a catalyst for building emotional flexibility, building connection, and building confidence. And it's really founded on three principles. We use play, we use storytelling, and we use movement in this group setting. So it's a group and it's not performative, like there's no show. It's a therapeutic group, and it's something that I've developed that I'm very proud of, and I think it's a really fun way to practice skills and practice building connection and finding our voice. So this is a group that's good for people who maybe have found a little bit of a rut in the just talk therapy spaces and want to sort of embody the learning. I'm very big on it's not just the intellectual learning. A lot of us, we know, oh, I know I need to stop behaving in this way, but a lot of times what's missing for people is the embodied learning, is that our bodies haven't caught up to the intellect that we know. And so improv therapy really helps build that skill.
I hope everybody checks out your work, and thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Dude, thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
That's it for this episode of Improv in Real Life. For more info about our guest and other resources, you can visit our show notes. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please follow or subscribe wherever you listen. And if you're feeling extra generous, write us a review or share with a friend. You can also find us on Instagram at lifestage_inc. And if you want to dive deeper into these concepts, please connect with me on Substack at Jude Treder-Wolff.
To be continued, to be continued, to be continued.
We need each other now more than ever. We need creativity more than ever. I hope these games and ideas inspire you in some way. And if they do, keep it going. I will too. See you next time.